The work and the life of Danny Glover, and here he is. Nice to see you, man. How are things? When Clement Virgo was going to do this movie, Poor Boy's Game, he said it was about race, class, forgiveness.
Exactly.
It's perfect for you.
Well, it was all those things were evident in the script. When I read the script, I saw something that was always important to me. I come out of a family, I'm a child of the Civil Rights Movement by virtue of the time that I was born.
Yeah.
And by the time of the year in my life, you know, when I went to college, all the things that transpired, that period of time which saw me from the earliest points of my life, 8, 9, 10 years old, watching this movement unfold. And certainly the men and women who I aspired to be like or emulate were men and women who were part of that movement.
Were they actors? Were they entertainers?
Well, they weren't entertainers, because acting wasn't even on my radar screen until I was almost 30 years old as a possibility career. But I worked in community service. I graduated in economics. My field of study was economics. I worked in the Office of Community Development in San Francisco for the mayor's office. I've always been someone to figure out, as experienced by the Ethnic Studies program that we established in San Francisco State in 1968-69 for the strike, the relationships that we developed with progressive whites, Latinos, Native Americans, Asian Americans. I'm trying to figure out how we can find ways in which we can pull us together. Yeah. So when Clement came to me with Poor Boy's Game, it was perfect in the sense, because it just talked about those things: forgiveness. It talked about healing. It dealt with the issues around these two communities, both poor working class communities. Yeah. And there's a history of that throughout human history, of poor working class communities coming together. And putting aside the kind of the tension which is often exasperated by other forces around race, and then coming together and working for their own objective. So one reason why I work with unions. You walk in a union store and you hear Asian people and Latin people Latin and white people and black people calling each other brothers and sisters. Yeah.
It's always the only place you'll see that.
The only place that brothers and sisters. I love that. The sound of that resonates with me. Brothers and sisters.
It's interesting to talk about your career, because it is more than just being on screen, and there's enough years behind it now where you sort of, like you've paced yourself, you sort of established who you are. People know who you are, yet like you're an interesting Hollywood star, because you don't know much about you aside from what you're passionate about socially, and then if you make a movie. Like that's it. You don't hear a lot about Danny Glover in between, unless, of course, you work with Hugo Chavez.
And it's interesting how my relationship starts with someone like President Chavez. You know, I'm the chairman of the board of Trans-Africa Forum, which is a institution which looks at U.S. policy toward Africa and the African diaspora. We have been invited just about 3.5 years ago, a little bit over 3.5 years ago, to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday. We had a meeting with the members of these Afro-descended groups and the president, Hugo Chavez, and in that meeting, we discussed their particular issues and their particular concerns. And the president immediately set up a commission, the Presidential Commission Against Racism and All Forms of Discrimination, made that a national commission. And 2 years later, when I was back there, I watched the commission in action, and it was a functional commission. It wasn't some sort of presidential plaything. Yeah. You know, with a lot of hype around it. But so I said, this is interesting that someone says they're going to do something, and what they articulate what they're going to do, and they put what they're going to do in action.
I mean, you weren't 25 when you started this, but the experience of an African-American actor in Hollywood now versus like a 60-year-old, 61-year-old versus what a 25-year-old African-American's experience with Hollywood would be right now, and how much different it would be.
How much different it would be?
Like, if you're 25, right, and like if you're sitting there and having dinner with a 25-year-old actor, his experience, relationship with Hollywood versus yours.
Well, my experience was that, well, it's a different experience, certainly, and we can, you know, there have been times at different moments, the genre of films, that are available, the work that you're available to do, and since because the kind of, I think what has happened in Hollywood is that there are just a few people, a few men, and generally white men, who decide what everybody in the world sees.
Yeah.
There's a handful of them decide what you're going to see.
Who's going to get the part?
Who's going to get the part? What movies are going to be made? And I think that's the difference. I mean, one of the reasons why you have 88% of Canadian screens have American films on it is that it's eviscerated the Canadian film industry. Mm-hmm. Just on the onrush of monopolization of culture, and people are talking about cultural democracy and cultural inclusion. People around the world, Canadians are talking about because they're losing a sense of who they are by virtue of the kind of cultural production that comes up and dominates their screen, and dominates their world.
Isn't it in the art where your culture is represented?
That's the only way. People envision themselves. People tell their stories. People create their own identity through how they fictionalize themselves, how they see themselves in relation to the rest of the world. You have to have control of that.
If you're on the set of an indie film of some sort, there is an idea that this is going to do what it will do. There's almost, barring an amazing success like Sex, Lies, and Videotape when it had its moment.
Yeah.
In Sundance, but you generally know where that's going to fit in the discussion. Yeah. Do you know when you're working, like when you and Mel were doing the Lethal Weapon, the first one, did you know that this is going to be massive?
Not in a way. There were ways in which, certainly when you make a movie for $25 million and it does $70 million domestically.
Yeah. And
right there. I mean, that particular point in time, people said, wow, now I expect a $25 million movie to make $150 million.
Or it's a failure.
It's a failure. You know what I mean? That's how the game is played now. There's a difference between now and 21 years ago when Mel and I made the first Lethal Weapon. So... But you do know that something special is happening, and we knew something special was happening in the first read through. And I remember Mark Cannon, who was one of the three heads of Warner Brothers at the time. After we finished reading, he looked around and he said, "Okay, let's go make a movie." It's just like that, you know what I'm saying?
It's different now,
let's go make a movie,
Nice.
And by the time I'd flown back to Chicago, I had to perform that night, Tuesday night. By the time I got back, we had all negotiated a deal. That quickly.
When I told people you were having you on the show, they said one of three things. A, they know I'm a huge fan of the movie Grand Canyon, right?
Yeah.
So they talked about Grand Canyon. They wanted to know, were you really in Escape from Alcatraz? That was one of your early roles, they said.
Yeah, I kind of I was like, they have the over the shoulder, in coverage. They have the over the shoulder.
Yeah.
I think, and in fact they had somebody redo the voice. It's not in sound my voice, but I get a $2.50 residual check.
And it's a great film. And the other
$5 residual check for the company.
And do you still talk to Mel? Do you guys have a relationship?
Yeah, well, Mel and I talk all the time, man. We talk, we've had it's not the kind of relationship where you call him up on his birthday and say, hey, happy birthday. He'll call me up and say, it was a happy birthday, and how you doing, what's going on,
Well, what's going on with him.
Well,
it was all over the place.
Well, I try not to be, engaged in that. The Mel and I know, the Mel that has been, close to me is not only the one I've worked with, but we've done things together. I remember we were trying to do something with Oxfam, trying to talk about issues of hunger. I often hear stuff, but I don't become part of the gossip behind stuff.
It's not your business anyway, right?
In fact, I don't live in LA, so most of it I don't hear anyway.
My mother says hello. She loves you.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Danny Glover. The film is called Poor Boys Game. Check it out if you get a chance. The Hour will be right back.